a biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
Well, with all the breaking news out of Israel and the Middle East, I'm joined by Mandy Worby in the studio today. Mandy, fighting between Israel and Hezbollah has ramped up and the criticism of Israel hasn't waned. They're still being accused of targeting civilians.
I know, it actually makes my blood boil. When it comes to Hezbollah's terrorist modus operandi, it is identical to that of Hamas. Okay, they have proven over and over and over again that they are basically the same unit. They live in a different place and they go by a different name. That's all. As we know, Hamas built a terrorist infrastructure underneath their civilians and they hide behind their civilians in order to wage war. And this maximises civilian casualties when Israel responds. Hezbollah has done exactly the same thing in Lebanon. But what's happened is that the IDF they've done the same thing that they did to the people of Gaza. They have set up automated phone calls, some of them even live, to the people of Lebanon. They've dropped millions of leaflets and flyers telling them you need to get out of this particular zone and move to another zone. They've intercepted Lebanese radio and actually broadcast live on Lebanese radio without the Lebanese radio people being in control of it, to warn the people of Lebanon to get to safety. Bibi Netanyahu put out a video overnight yesterday just to the people of Lebanon saying, our fight is not with you. We don't have a problem with you. Our fight is with Hezbollah, who's embedded themselves in and around and behind you and under you, putting you at risk. And they basically said, if you've got any weapons or rockets stored in your homes, you need to leave because we're taking them out. We're getting rid of Hezbollah.
Incredible technology they've got, haven't they, to intercept the radio network. But the conflict has really increased dramatically between Israel and Hezbollah. So how is this conflict going?
Well, it's really beefed up in the last day or two. Again, Israel mobilised and moved a lot of their weapons of war north. Hamas in Gaza are on their knees. It has to be said they're on their knees. There's also suspicion that Yahya Sinwar may be dead. It's not confirmed, but there's been nothing from him. And there's been minimal rocket fire. So Hamas is almost broken in Gaza. There's still problems. The IDF is still there, but they're focusing on the north now, and they've gone in really hard. They've taken out something like 800 terrorist sites. But the fighting has really been focused on the Bekaa Valley, and also the Jabal al-Batam village. And that's basically because of the weapon stores in civilian homes. We mentioned secondary explosions. When all these weapons are stored in and underneath the homes, and Israel knows about it, it's a legitimate target of war now. It's a civilian home, but it's a legitimate target of war according to the rules of international law. And when they go these houses and the rockets are flying out of them and there's secondary explosions going on, telling you this was a weapons storage. They've even got footage of a truck in the garage coming out with a mobile rocket launcher on it and a rocket on there, comes out, shoots at Israel and then hides inside a human home again. They're finding all this stuff. So Israel has warned them repeatedly, and Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari of the IDF said this: "We will continue to show what Hezbollah has been doing over the past 20 years in a vast project where they have turned thousands of civilian homes in southern Lebanon, and not only southern Lebanon, into terror bases, turning southern Lebanon into a combat zone." So by doing what they've done, Hezbollah has not only set up their own people, but they are war criminals. Israel didn't start this fight. On October 7, Hamas massacred 1,200 Israelis, kidnapped 255 and started a war. The very next day, on October 8, Hezbollah got into a war and a fight that they had no part to play in, and they started a war with Israel. And Israel has taken nearly a year to really turn this thing around and start fighting back. It's over 7,000 rockets now, and Israel is going, no more. So it's really heating up, and Hezbollah continue to fire. I mean, it was yesterday, I think it was just between, up until midday, there was 100 rockets fired into Israeli homes and communities. So
Wow. And what's happening with Jordan on Israel's eastern border, Mandy?
Okay, well, Jordan has a peace treaty with Israel that's been in place since 1994. And they recently had elections, and what was concerning is that a party called the Islamic Action Front, which is basically the Muslim Brotherhood, they won 31 out of, I believe it's 138 seats of the parliament, so they had big successes. They were organising rallies in the street, chanting, in favour of Hamas, saying, "We are all Hamas." Yahya Sinwar is our leader. So that tells you the heart and MO of this particular group and those who follow them. What needs to be pointed out here, and I read this in an article at dw.com, it's an article called "How Dangerous is the Islamist Victory in Jordan's Elections," pointed out that half the population of Jordan are Palestinians, okay? And that takes us back to the British mandate when there was an allocated land made there for a Jewish homeland, and the British mandate cut off more than 2/3 of that and gave it to the Arabs for a Palestinian homeland. And they called it Jordan. That is the Arab state. A little sliver was left for Israel. And they basically want it all. Now, the concern is, what could these people do? What could this party do? Well, they really can't do a whole lot because the King of Jordan, King Abdullah II, he basically holds all political power. It would take a coup or an overthrow of the royal family in order to change this. And that's happened before. We know that. France, Nepal, Iran, Russia, they've all had overthrows of their monarchies. But they are a very beloved royal family in Jordan. So that's not particularly likely, but the King of Jordan could actually use this to pressure the rest of the world to say, if Jordan becomes destabilised because of this faction that's rising up, you can stop that and take the pressure off us by getting harsher and less favourable toward Israel. Not that the world is very favourable toward Israel at the moment, but that's what he could do. We'll just have to watch this space to see what happens.
And there was an Iranian delegation that went to Jordan as well.
Yes, I'm glad you pointed that out. Yes, the Iranian delegation has just in the last couple of days went to Jordan, met with the King of Jordan, King Abdullah II, and this delegation included the new president. And the new president has said that he is going to hold nothing back when it comes to trying to take out and destroy Israel. So that I don't know the results of that, but the photos, they were all chummy and smiley, but, politics and PR and all that. Don't know what that's going to result in. We're just going to have to wait and see.
Watch this space.
Yeah.
And there's a UN vote that literally sets Israel up for extermination.
This was absolutely deplorable. I mean, we have known for years and years that the UN is rabidly anti-Israel. I mean, the very fact that Israel has been condemned more than any other nation and that they can demonstrably and unequivocally prove that she's not guilty of what she's been accused of. Also, that item number 7 on the UNGA agenda is always Israel. It proves that the UN is anti-Israel. But since Hamas massacred Israelis and started a war on October 7th, there is now no hiding or restraining the anti-Israel hatred and bias anymore. It's literally been unleashed. It's open, it's blatant, and it is completely unrestrained. It's no holds barred. And the PA, headed by Mahmoud Abbas, who is in his 20th year of a 4-year term. That's the mark of a dictator, in case anyone was wondering, a despot. The PLO put a resolution forward that Israel has to withdraw from Judea and Samaria, that's the area that the world calls the West Bank, and half of Jerusalem, and they want all of this done within a year. Just so you know, with the West Bank, when Israel's War of Independence took place, Jordan joined the fight and they took control of Judea and Samaria and half of Jerusalem. And they occupied that for 15 years. They were the ones who called it the West Bank because it was the West Bank of the Jordan River. But it was never called that in history. And every nation on the planet except for the UK, Britain and Pakistan condemned Jordan for it. They said it was an illegal occupation. Now, when Israel took that back in a war of self-defense and it became part of Israel, they were taking back what was already theirs. But they're condemned for it, and the world keeps calling it the West Bank, which was an illegal name from an illegal occupation. That's just for free, just throwing that in there. But when this vote was put to the Assembly, it passed. A small number of nations opposed that resolution. Just over 40 abstained, including Australia, to our shame. And the majority voted in favour of it. Now, first of all, it needs to be explained that these resolutions are non-binding, which means they cannot be enforced, and they are not law. They are not international law. At best, they're recommendations. Again, they're non-binding, non-enforceable. Now, with this resolution, it was in direct conflict with and contradiction to other resolutions that the UN has passed about Israel's security and borders and all the rest of it. So the UN is actually undermining itself. And I want to give you an example. And this hasn't to do with Israel. It has to do with Lebanon. The UN passed a resolution, it was called 1701, that said Hezbollah was not to go south of the Litani River. They were not allowed to establish weapons and warfare along the border with Israel. And the UN actually left peacekeepers there called UNIFIL, the UNIFIL, along the border to make sure that this was implemented. From day one, when Hezbollah moved in, when Israel left the buffer zone 20 years ago, they established a terror base with between 150,000 and 200,000 rockets supplied by Iran and missiles all directed at Israel. UNIFIL has been videoed. When Hezbollah comes out, UNIFIL just goes back inside their buildings. They have done nothing to stop that, to enforce Resolution 1701. So the efforts by the nations of the world at the UN to destroy Israel, because that's what this resolution means, it's not going to be fulfilled by Israel. And the UN has also called on the member states to boycott Israel. I'm going to just finish very quickly with a quote from the president of the Human Rights Voices NGO director of the Taro Institute on Human Rights and the Holocaust. He said this: the Palestinian Authority was permitted to draft a UN General Assembly resolution, and the threat that it represents, that the resolution declares open season on Israelis. Okay? You need to know the Palestinians are not full members of the UN. They simply have observer status. So we need to pray for Israel. We need to pray earnestly for Israel.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.